My name is Kristy Robinett. I am your presenter tonight for Grave Matters. Those of you that may have no idea why you're here, I am a professional psychic medium. I'm an author. I am a psychic profiler. And today we are going to talk about all things death and dread. Perfect for October, right? So those of you that have no idea why you're here, if you want to leave now, you can. So, and I'll do questions at the end as well. The other thing is just housekeeping. If you can silence your phones, that'd be amazing. A couple nights ago, we had someone that answered their phone in the middle, had a whole conversation. I was fine with it because I can talk to a tree stump and it's a great conversation, but the other people in the audience were ready to create a mutiny. And it would have been a part of my next lecture, I'm sure. So I might have to do pirates next year or something. So thank you guys for silencing, I appreciate it. So we're gonna first start off with the Victorian era and the obsession with death and how it sort of influenced us and still influences us today. There's no quiz at the end. I try to make this as simple for you. I'm not gonna call on you like a comedian might do to make fun. There's none of that tonight. Tomorrow night, if you call. No, there's really nothing here tomorrow night either. Grieving was influenced by historical context, cultural norms, religious beliefs, and pretty much by Queen Victoria. It's her fault that we do the grieving that we do. The fascination with death and mourning played a significant role in shaping our culture, our era, and the way that we do things and the way that we don't do things now. Just in case you don't remember when the Victorian era was, it was 1837 to 1901. The Victorians had a great love of big, grand gestures. And that gradually evolved into the mourning itself, into the display of wealth and status. Widows were required to embody grief, much like it was their job. And those that had money, and maybe, money didn't equate to popularity. If they had money and they didn't have enough friends, they actually would pay people to be grievers at their funeral or at their family member's funeral. So it literally became a job. During the 1800s, the reign of Queen Victoria influenced many in that daily life, and it was her grief of her husband that started this, and that was Prince Albert in 1861. It was felt long after he was gone. And it was Queen Victoria that ended up contacting a medium and saying, I still have things that I want to know from him and to talk to him about. And they started doing seances. She claimed that she became a medium herself, and she would talk to the medium, and she would talk to other people's loved ones as a medium as she was a queen. So back then, it wasn't the stigma that we sort of knew in the 60s and 70s and even 80s, and now we don't have as much of a stigma. I mean, nobody is going to career day at their high school saying, I want to be a psychic medium. That's not, no guidance, any guidance counselors here. I don't know how many of you are getting that, as a career choice. The Civil War pitted North against the South, and it resulted in 620,000 deaths, and families wept bitterly over that. The death practices of the Victorian era were some of the most complex in the Western world. While we don't follow all those rules today, we still take a lot of that today, especially with regards to the children. And there were specific mourning times. Widows were expected to wear special clothes to indicate that they were mourning. For up to 4 years, you had to wear black. Hot Topic would have been doing really great if it had been during that time. Half mourning, muted colors such as lilac and gray and lavender could be introduced, and children were only expected for 6 months to wear the black. And it was stylish. It ended up becoming a very well industry to sell the stylish grieving outfits. The specifics of the mourning attire was strictly defined by social etiquette, so pretty much where you stood within that social setting, and it included guidelines for the fabric. Was it silk? Was it cotton? What was it? And the jewelry and the accessories that sort of told people what their status was. Some of the material, like I said, it could be wool blend, it could be silk, it could be crepe, and they were chosen by the color of the matte or the shininess. And that sort of also told them, others, what their social status was. Now we have social media. They had what clothes they were wearing, and if they were shiny clothes or if they were flat clothes. And then the other items that they had were brooches and lockets and veils and bonnets, and the men wore a black armband to say that they were in grief, in mourning. Just as we have lockets with our loved ones' photographs in them, mourning jewelry was actually something that was huge, and I've seen it sort of kind of come back in the last 10 years, where there's pieces or strands of the hair that is put in a locket and is carried, and we see that a lot with ashes now, that people are utilizing that. But in that day, they used to create wreaths, very complicated and complex wreaths out of that, along with bracelets, rings, brooches, and even buttons. And the men would wear the cufflinks with everything from hair to teeth in them. I will tell my husband right now, I do not want him to take my teeth. It's fine. If you want some of my hair, that's okay. But and similar to putting a piece of hair in that locket, like we said, they would make those mourning wreaths. One place that I know that does have one is if you've ever been to the Straight Farmhouse in Garden City, they have several different mourning pieces, wreaths and jewelry on display. They're kind of hidden in a little bit of a scavenger hunt sort of a way, but if you ever want to see one kind of in person, you can go there, and I'm sure that they can point that out to you. When the Queen recently died in, just, was it this year or last year? Time flies, right? We heard a lot about don't forget to tell the bees. And this started with Queen Victoria, where they had to go out to where the hives were, and they had to gently tell the bees that the master had passed away, because they felt like the animals would connect to that grief and they would not respond. So the cows would not give milk and the bees would not give honey, and so there still is the custom of telling the bees and the beehive and sharing the news with the bees, and they needed to be informed. They needed their honey to continue to be made. So it is believed that failing to inform those bees or failing to inform the cows, depending upon your status and what you were keeping at the time, that it would bring bad luck. While that tradition may sound a little bit obscure and quaint and superstitious, they were in a rural area. That was rural life. And we have our own superstitions, which have been passed down through generations, and we're going to talk about all of those. And then I want you guys to also think of some of the death superstitions that you were told by your grandparents, great-grandparents, parents, and I hope that we can share those. So because there was so much death in that time frame, people wanted to talk to their loved ones. They wanted to talk to the dead. And there were three sisters in particular that sort of began the spiritualist movement, and they were the Fox sisters. They were the Kardashians of the time. They were very popular, they were very beautiful, they were very well known, and it was Margaret and Kate that became locally noticed for being able to talk to the dead. Their sister was sort of an interpreter with regards to that. They were very young, and they ended up, their parents moved them into a home in New York, and come to find out that the house was haunted. And with a series of raps, they determined that there was a man that was buried under the front porch of the house that they were renting. And with the permission of the landlord, the parents dug after the kids continued this repertoire of there's a ghost here and we need to dig. And so they did, and there were skeletal remains underneath. Because they had such validation, they became so well known and so popular, and it became for entertainment, but it also, a lot of people took them very seriously, and they traveled all around the world. They were very, very well known, but they got so stressed out. They were doing these seances, and they were so stressed out that they decided that they would say that they were faking it because they didn't want to travel anymore. They had made a ton of money, they had made their parents money, and they had 1 million followers in the mid-1800s. So they said, nope, we were faking, we were using, we were double jointed, we were using the cracking of our knuckles, the cracking of our knees, and that was the fake rappings that you heard. And then they kind of became alcoholics, and then they lost money, and then they said, wait a minute, it was real the whole time. We would like to have a comeback, and we would like to be your mediums. And by that time, they had already corrupted what we now know as mediums and seances. They were considered frauds, and they really didn't ever make a comeback. But they're still very well known because it is believed that they were not faking, that they were true and real, and that they were just overwhelmed with that popularity and being presented with the travel and it was a lot for them. I often say that because I am a medium by profession, I often say it's I don't like calling them dead because I think they're living better than we are, but for context, the dead that don't bother me, it's the living that drive me crazy. So it was probably the same. So we know Thomas Edison, right? But did we know that Thomas Edison loved to figure out inventions? And the one thing that he really wanted to invent was some sort of tool to talk to the dead. And they believe that possibly that's how we got the telephone, or the start of it. So he created a spiritual telegraph, an automatic writing machine, and a spirit phone. He was one of the biggest in the spiritualist community, and he was fascinated with both the science of it and the paranormal part of it. And so throughout his life, he was very involved in trying to figure out how to talk to the dead. He really wanted to talk to his mom. And he ended up becoming pretty successful, obviously. All right, someone's really playing with me. All right, so one of the things that he did, has anyone ever been to the Whitney in downtown Detroit? So the Whitney, as you know it, is pretty haunted, right? They love to tell their ghost stories. They actually will leave a radio on in order to keep the Whitney family content so they don't mess up anything in the dining room or the kitchen. And it is cited that both Mr. Whitney and his second wife haunt it, but his first wife does too because his second wife was the sister. Just saying. It wasn't really as scandalous because he had kids with the first wife, and when she passed away, who was the love of his life, he needed somebody to take care of the kids. So it was a matter of convenience. But that sister got the mansion. The love of his life did not. And so they say they're still quarreling in the mansion because she got to live in that mansion. But Thomas Edison was friends with Mr. Whitney, and he actually personally helped to light the mansion. And there has been many haunting tales that say that Edison actually has visited the Whitney in spirit several times. And you might see lights going on and off, or if you're utilizing any of the equipment, you might get the name of Thomas or Edison with regards to it. So that's sort of a famous ghost that you can talk to and have a really nice meal. I used to be the ghostess of the Whitney. They have somebody else that's doing it right now. We have lights going off and on over here, and I keep seeing if someone over here is playing with us. It's probably, it's Thomas Edison, maybe. He's like, you're telling my story completely wrong. And then we have Victoria Woodhull. Sorry, you guys. Woodhull is perhaps known best for her 1872 run for president. 1872. She was the first woman to do so. And she spent her lifetime blazing trails across multiple disciplines. From an early age, she believed that she received guidance and protection from beyond. And she claimed to be a medium. She received information from the deceased, and she empowered other women to believe that they could trust their own intuition. It wasn't necessarily talk to the dead. It was trust your intuition and kind of go through whatever path you want to go through. So she was an amazing woman. If you don't know about her, look her up because she is super fascinating. So do you know this gentleman? Do you know this gentleman? You should. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And he is best known for creating Sherlock Holmes. In the late 19th and early 20th century, he was also one of the best known spiritualists. And Houdini and him were both very good friends. However, Houdini did not like anybody that was connected to spiritualism because he believed that they were all frauds. Now, again, the Fox sisters proved that, right? Or so they said. And Houdini was also a magician, and his job was to con everybody in the audience. That is what he does. And that is what he did, and he did it very, very well. So the two of them would go back and forth, and some days they'd be friends, and some days they would be foes. And Houdini really, really wanted to talk to his loved ones on the other side. And he had this thing with regards to, I want to say it was his mother. Some people say that it was his wife, but I believe it was his mother, that if he went to a medium and the medium had a specific message that he knew that only his mom would know before she passed away, he whispered to her and said, you tell a medium this, then I will believe that you made it to the other side and that the medium is not a fraud. And so Doyle, being such a believer, took him to all of these mediums' houses, and they went back and forth to all of these houses all over where he was performing, and no one got it right. And when they didn't get it right, he would call these mediums out, and it would be just brutal for their reputation. But he also didn't want to believe. And so he went to this one medium, and she said, your mother says this. And she said the word. And he said, somebody told you. But nobody else knew. And so he still made her out to be a fraud when Doyle was like, you know that she knows. Do you guys know what that word was? Believe. If the medium said believe, then he knew that that was the right one. And this medium said that, and he still did not want to believe. How ironic is that? So we all know Dan Aykroyd, right? Well known for SNL. We know him with regards to Ghostbusters. Which then went into everything else, why we have a lot of the paranormal shows. Well, Dan Aykroyd, in addition to being a member of SNL and being an amazing actor and a comedian, it was his great-grandfather that was connected to the spiritualist community as well. And it was him that helped write the script to Ghostbusters. Aykroyd didn't have to look for that inspiration very far because his family believed. And they would often have seances in their homes, and they believed in the afterlife and spirit activity. Now, they were from Canada, or are from Canada. Canadians and Europeans seem to be more accepting than even those in the US. And so there was regularly hosted seances in the family's farmhouse. Has anyone had a death dream premonition where you knew that someone was going to pass away, or you were visited by an apparition at the end of your bed, or you received a phone call from somebody and said, you know, I just need to tell you X, Y, and Z, and then 5 minutes later you get the call that they had passed away? That is something that a lot of people have received, and sometimes it's spooky. I think it's cool because I do believe that the other side communicates with us. Death dream premonitions aren't supposed to be foreboding. You know the whole thing of if you dream that you die, you will die? That's actually not true at all. If you die in your dream, you are probably going to be going through a renewal of some sort. Just like the tarot and the death card, it is that there's going to be new beginnings. It's a rebirth that will happen. Death dream premonitions with regards to seeing loved ones on the other side, it doesn't mean that you're supposed to call Aunt Edna up and say, I think you're going to die. I dreamt I saw you in a coffin, because it's not always that literal. But sometimes it is. And then sometimes it's not. My dad had a dream in 1999. And he dreamt that who he said was God came to him and said, I'm going to tell you when you're going to die. And you have to look at your arm. And so he looked at his arm and it said 200, and then it was smudged. And so for all those years, those 9-10 years, he thought for sure he was going to die. He didn't. Not until 2022. So it's where, again, I always say, don't take it so literal all the time. Maybe they were saying it's time for you to live and not time for you to die. I feel like we just need to do a ghost hunt in here right now. I think that's what they're trying to tell us to do. One of those that were very connected to the spiritualist community were the Lincolns. And Mrs. Lincoln, Mary Todd Lincoln, believed in the afterlife, and she had seances in her house often, in the White House often, especially after their son died. She was often ridiculed, though, for it because, stature and all of that. But Abe also believed. In 1865, 2 weeks before he was shot dead, Lincoln had a psychic dream about a funeral at the White House. And in the dream, he asked someone who was in the casket. They replied, the President of the United States. He told his wife about the dream, but neither of them took it to heart. And on the night of his assassination, he gave his bodyguard the night off. They also say that he looked in the mirror, and when he looked in the mirror just a week before his assassination, he saw the Grim Reaper. And he thought, well, maybe that's new beginnings. Maybe that's not literal. Would he have done anything different? Probably not. You can't hide from it. I don't necessarily know if you can change your path or your journey. Has anyone heard of black-eyed kids? It's kind of a spooky story that I have that I forgot I was going to be on Livonia television for, so I hope I don't offend anybody with this story. The term black-eyed kids refers to a modern urban legend and paranormal phenomenon often discussed in online cultures and popular cultures connected with children, usually the ages of 6 to 16, who approach people and ask for permission to come into their home or into their life in some way, shape, or form, and their eyes are hollowed out. And They have different opinions on what they are. Are they demons? Are they skinwalkers? Are they real? Are they black-eyed kids? They say don't give them entry because you'll get bad luck or you may yourself die. And it could be the Grim Reaper, is what the urban legend states. I had my own story that happened on Mackinac Island. Anyone love Mackinac? I hope I don't ruin this for you guys, because I'm not telling you to not go to Mackinac. I promise. Go to Mackinac Island. It's beautiful. I promise that you, well, I can't promise that. Forget my promise. You more than likely will not come into contact with a black-eyed child. I was there several years ago. We were there, we were holding a conference. We were doing a lot of different ghost hunts. Mission Point Resort, the theater. We were doing a bunch of events there. And it's one of my favorite places, honestly. It's very paranormally active. There's lots of ghost stories there. They are starting to come around and like their ghosts. The Grand Hotel used to not. They would deny that there were any ghosts. But now I saw this year they are starting to open that up. I don't know if it's because of that or because they're realizing that the paranormal is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Not sure. Or maybe a little bit of both. But I had all my friends, we were in town, it was before we were going to do an event, and we were just perusing the different shops, and my family and my friends decided they were going to go across the street and they were going to get some fudge or something at one of the shops. And I had seen I'm such a girl, I had seen a purse in one of the shops, and I thought, maybe I'll go buy it. And so I told them, I'll meet you across the street. I'm going to go look at this purse and probably purchase it. And so I went into the shop and I looked and I went, oh, I got a lot of purses. I probably shouldn't. So I don't know how I had constraint, but I did that day. And I walked out, and as soon as I walked out, there was a child about the age of 8 years old that was dressed in a wool coat and one of those paperboy, type of hats. And he turned and he looked at me, and the whole street froze. Nobody moved. It turned empty, and the people which it was very busy, and the people that were there just froze, as if in time it froze. And he looked at me and he said, "Hi, Kristy." And he had hollow eyes. And I couldn't talk. And I knew that I shouldn't talk. And so all I kept doing in my head was saying the Lord's Prayer. And something clicked, and he looked at me and kind of winked at me as if to say, "I'll see you again." And everything, motion started back up, and he disappeared. And that was my black-eyed kid story. However, after that, we had such a series of bad luck that happened after that I kept going, is this coincidental? Am I psyching myself out? Am I manifesting this? And I ended up having to do a lot of cleansing. Nothing horrible happened. Obviously, I'm still here, so I didn't pass away. Nobody in my family passed away, but it was very frightening. So I hope to never come into contact with an 8-year-old one of these again. So the mystery of death. We really don't know, right? What is death until we are on the other side? And we all know our ending. We all know that eventually our physical body will stop. And will we go to the other side? Will we not? I am a medium by profession. I believe that there is an afterlife. I am also a believer in God. I was raised Lutheran, so that might sound like an oxymoron, but I won't bore you with my whole story, but that is what I believe. I have had friends that were Satanists that had an awful lot of negative things that happened, and one in particular, he is now a Methodist minister. So he decided to sort of shift his views because he felt like he literally was talking to the devil, and he eventually did not like it. I have had friends who have had near-death experiences that did not want to come back because they said the love of the other side that wrapped them up in that white light was the most beautiful thing, and they begged to not come back, and they came back. And I've had friends that have had near-death experiences that have just had nothing. It had been a tunnel of nothing, a void. Is that the brain playing tricks? Is it anesthesia? We don't know. We won't really know. We won't be able to say yes, definitely, until that's our time. I always say in my job, it's not my job to prove that there's an afterlife. Everyone has their own belief. And most people won't believe until they have their own experience. Postmortem photography. It seems so macabre, but a lot of times it was the only photograph that loved ones in the Victorian era had of their loved ones because that was the only time they could afford it. And most times they would prop them up and then they would paint eyes on them. I didn't share the photographs that I think are a little bit more graphic and sad, where they would have all of the family, including all of the kids, holding their sibling up that had passed away, or holding the baby that had passed away, to have their last family portrait. It was several years ago. I was at the Marshall House, or the National House in Marshall, Michigan. And we were doing an investigation. We were there overnight. It was a little bit of like a shining because we had a horrible snowstorm and there were only a few of us that were staying there. And they said, you've got the whole place, go do what you want to do, and it's fine with us, we'll see you in the morning. We were perusing the front bedroom, which they say is one of the most active places in that establishment, and over the bed was a photograph of a man. And the more that we stared at this man, the more that we realized that it was actually a post-mortem photograph. He was not alive in the photograph, and maybe that's why he was haunting that home. So we took it down, and in the morning we showed it to the owner, and he said, do you even know who this person is? And we took the frame off of it, and on the back, the funeral home stamp was on. And she said, no, I got that in an antique shop. Had no idea. Just thought it fit with the whole sentiment of the home. If you go to antique shops, you will likely find a lot of photographs that are of, obviously they're dead people, but they were dead when they were being photographed. I used to have a collection and it freaked my kids out, and I no longer have a collection. I had an incident when I was just really little, and I was sitting with my mom, and I was probably all of 3, 4 years old, and I was at my grandma and grandpa's house in Detroit. And I said to her, remember when there was that funeral at this house and the coffin was right there? And she looked at me and she's like, yes, but you weren't here then. And they often would have funerals in the homes. Even in the 60s, even in the 50s, even in the 40s. It stopped, you know, thank goodness we're not having those so much anymore. But they would often have a window where people would walk through. I don't know if they don't like what I'm talking about or they do. I'm not sure, you guys. They would walk by the window on the outside and they would give their love to them. But it was a custom of having somebody watch over their loved ones in the parlor, just for jeopardy in case you're ever on it. So there were so many funerals at homes over the years that nobody wanted to stay in the parlor because it was pretty like, oh my gosh, Uncle Ed was there and Grandpa Roy was there, and you know, so everyone was conjuring their parlor with having funerals. And so funeral homes opened for several different reasons, and we renamed the parlor the living room for a reason. Now we call it a great room. Grave robbers were something of the past. Grave robbery by the resurrection men were often doctors themselves because they needed to study fresh cadavers. So they started to put grates over, and they would actually, some people, if they were wealthy enough, they would have people guard their loved ones. It was a way of guaranteeing the security after death. I personally think there's a lot of karma for disturbing any cemetery or disturbing any grave. I would not want that. The fear of being buried alive peaked during the cholera epidemic in the 19th century, and the accounts of unintentional live burials were recorded even earlier than that. The fears of being buried alive were heightened by reports of doctors and accounts in literature and newspapers. And so they would tie a bell to like the toe or the hand of those that were so-called passed away or those that were passed away, and they would string it off out of the coffin up through the dirt, and they would have people wait to see if they heard a bell ring, and then they could dig them up in time to hopefully, possibly save them. We sometimes get that every once in a while, don't we? We just had a report not long ago in another country that somebody was alive but was dead in the freezer of the... I don't think she lived very long after that, though. The other thing that they would do, by the way, this is American Dolls, so American Dolls, do not sue me, please, but they used to make lifelike doll versions of their deceased infants, and they would hold them. They would put their own child's clothing on them. They would even put the cuttings of their infant's hair and sew it onto the dolls. And then because there was so much death, they would actually have, for Christmas, the kids would get death kits. Here is your own baby, and here is a coffin, and here is, instead of playing house, let's play funeral. And you might have actually seen these dolls again in antique shops and thought, oh, look at, they got cute rosy cheeks and a coffin. There's lots of different superstitions with even, and still today, with even how you're buried and how you're taken out and how that whole process works. I actually just saw a TikTok of somebody who said that her husband was buried facing the wrong way and that they had to get him out of that space and turn him around. So they believed that if carried out head first, the deceased could see where the house was and return to haunt it. And additionally, the spirit that has not yet been laid to rest would be able to beckon the other spirits or lure the living to their own demise. And then they would have picnics in the cemetery. Do you know that they still do? My mom and dad are in a cemetery in Livonia, and every 4th of July and every Memorial Day, they have picnic next to your loved one, and they have barbecues out, and you get a hot dog, and you get to sit next to your loved ones. It doesn't do anything for me, but if I'm not judging for anybody that decides that that's what they want to do. Some people feel calm in a cemetery. I love cemeteries. I actually think cemeteries are the least haunted place. Because wouldn't you rather haunt the Whitney than a cemetery? I mean, I would rather be in a mansion, personally. Cemeteries, for me, I find are very peaceful, serene, calm, most cemeteries. And I also believe that you don't have to go to the cemetery in order to mourn or grieve your loved one. They can be in your car. They can be at your house. They can be at Target. It doesn't matter where you go. You can talk to them in your head. You don't have to be by their gravesite. I have a client that lost her husband to COVID, all of 35 years old, healthy man, 2 young children. And I was talking to her not long ago and asking how she was, and she said not well. And she said, my therapist told me that I need to stop visiting the cemetery. And I said, I am not going to tell you to not do that, or your therapist is wrong, but you do what makes you feel at peace. And then I thought, wait a minute, how often are you visiting the cemetery? And she said 6 times a day. And I said, honey, you do not have to do that. Please don't do that. Can we at least kind of chalk it, maybe once or twice a week? Can we whittle that down a little bit? And she said, what if his butterfly falls over, or the light that I have, the night light, stops working? And I'm like, he's with you. He's not there. So I talked to her actually today, and she said, I'm only going twice a day now. I said, well, we're getting there. We're getting there. Cemetery means sleeping place. And there is a difference between a cemetery and a graveyard. Do you guys know what the difference is? Church. Yeah, a graveyard is next to a church. In many cemeteries, the vast majority of graves are orientated in the manner of where the bodies lie, their heads to the west and their feet to the east. And that's what I told you of the person on TikTok that realized that her husband's was the other way around. And she had a lot of people that were giving her slack about it. And again, to each their own. If that was going to give her peace, to each their own. So the custom appears to originate with the pagan sun worshippers, but it's primarily attributed to Christians who believe the final summons to judgment will come from the east. I love visiting cemeteries and looking at grave epitaphs. It's something that I find fascinating. I have tried for years to put a book out on this, and nobody wants my book on this. So maybe I am the only one that thinks it's fascinating. But there's so much symbolism with what is put on a grave. We've come so far in the modern world with that. We have a cemetery not far from us that the gentleman must have been a truck driver, because the monument's in the shape of a truck. And when you pass by, it's like a hologram. You see the side profile of him in the picture, part of it. And now they actually have where you can scan it, and yeah, a QR code on it. But I keep thinking, in 50 years, will they even know what a QR code is? It going to be like the Nintendos of the PlayStations? I don't know. And there's so much detail with the legacy of who these people are with regards to what is put on their stone. So a cross is recognized largely as a Christian symbol that they had a faith. Angels represent heavenly messengers and guardians of the deceased. Doves are seen as peace and purity. A lamb on a gravestone is typically a child. An hourglass is symbolizing that time goes by so fast, or sometimes that it was somebody that was young and time slipped away. Skull and crossbones was originally associated with pirates. So if you go to like Charleston or Savannah, you'll see a lot of crossbones there. Now you might have somebody that utilizes that because they love tattoos. Don't know. It can switch over time. Roses is love and beauty, and the different color of those mean different things. Trees on a gravestone can symbolize life, growth, and the continuation of a family or the lineage of the family. A broken column symbolizes grief and the incompleteness of the time on earth. An anchor is often seen on graves of sailors or of hope. Torches, an inverted torch symbolizes extinguishing life, and et cetera, et cetera. There's so many. Books is that the deceased was wise. That's what I want. He's not paying attention. It's not that I wrote books, it's that I'm wise. He's a good husband, he nodded. It's good. But there's so many different things that you could put on your headstone. I told you I was sick. You can put a Ouija board on it. I recently saw that an older lady had pre-planned her funeral, and everybody that came got a Ouija board as like a parting gift. So I thought that was ingenious. Like, if you want to talk to me, this is how. Go away, I'm asleep. You can put your famous recipe on. These are real and true. And there are so many. I could have shared so many with you guys. Death superstitions. Do you guys have any in your family that you kind of keep with funerals or with the old wives' tales? Can you think of any?
Well, when I was younger, my dad always, when he came back from the funeral parlor, he hurried up and made us wash our hands.
Okay, that was probably smart for germs, but yeah, kind of washing the energy off.
You walk from the house, you just, whether you had your phone out or not, you just had to hurry up and wash your hands.
Perfect. Anybody else? Yes.
My grandmother told us never to count the cars in the funeral club.
Interesting. Was there a reason why?
Never told us.
Oh,
Just don't do it.
interesting. Yes.
We were taught never to like walk directly in front of the gravestone. We have to go around them, but not walk over the grave.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of people are like, don't walk on the grave. Anybody else? No? Yes.
Leave pennies or stones on the headstone.
Yeah, and there is a symbolism with what we leave on the gravestones. The pennies, a lot of it is with regards to the veterans, and there's a symbolism with regards to each coin that's left. And a lot of times there is like toys that's left on a child's gravestone, and the other one is to never touch any of it, to leave it be. Back in Victorian era, when there was a mirror, when there was a death, the mirrors were covered with black cloth. It was to prevent from trapping the deceased soul in that reflection. In parts of Germany and in Belgium, it was long customary to cover the mirrors with a whole white cloth, because it was thought that if a person saw his or her image in the mirror after a death household, that a person would die shortly. They believed that covering the mirrors with that trapped, that if the house would crack on its own, and it was an omen of death. Family portraits and photos were also covered, or they were flipped to prevent the person from possessing that. Or if a picture fell, I don't know, some of you have maybe, you'll remember this, if a photograph of someone fell, it was believed that they were the next person to pass away. And then we probably have all heard of the 3 knocks, or death comes in threes. And so that is, one of the biggest superstitions, that if you receive news of the death of a loved one, soon you might hear the death of 2 more. We say that a lot with celebrities, right? One is passed, we're waiting for the other 2. And then an owl and crows are also very much connected to death in superstitions. I happen to love owls and ravens and crows, and I have them in my office. I have had several different cultures, especially those in the Middle East, that will not enter my office until I do something with them, because they attribute that to something evil and death. So I have had to take down or go to another room in my office because they're frightened by that. Even when I explain it to them that it's much like the death card in tarot, it's rebirth. It's not that something bad is going to happen, but it is that whole family legacy of belief. Eagles and hawks are thought to be messengers from the loved ones. I especially see this with somebody who had been in the military. And we get signs from our loved ones all the time. I think I did that lecture last year, maybe. So you might get a penny, and you might get a dime, and you might get a song on the radio, and you might get a hawk and an eagle. I'm waiting for the $100 bills. I'm waiting for them to have a printing press on the other side. Why they have a coin press and now we have a coin shortage, it might not be disconnected. So this goes back to, putting the whole dark fabric on, but it used to be tied to the doorknobs to let people know that the dark angel had come calling, and a knock or a ringing doorbell would jar, and that they were supposed to be quiet so not to disrupt the dark angel or the grim reaper. So hearing an owl hoot on your rooftop could mean that death in the household is imminent. These are superstitions. These aren't for real. So don't go home and go, oh my gosh, was that an owl on my rooftop? Please do. And then I get an email and you're like, do you see me dying? No. Dead birds. I actually receive an awful lot of emails with regards to this, that they stepped out of their stoop and there was a dead bird, or a bird just fell and died in front of them, and asking if that's a sign of death, because we've seen that in movies and in stories as a bad omen. Stephen King certainly, and Hitchcock has really given us, that theory. That is not necessarily true. The bird was probably just gonna pass away. And it changes from culture to culture. If the sun shines brightly on someone's face at a funeral, they are next to die. No, not for real. Death knocks, or the knock of doom. They say at 3 in the morning, if you hear a knock on your door or a window, do not open it, because it could be the knock of doom. Black-eyed kids, again, is the visit from the reaper. An apparition of woman wearing all white means death is near for the seer. So we're safe after Labor Day, is what they're saying. That's what they're saying. Doppelgangers. Have you guys ever seen a doppelganger? Do you know what a doppelganger is? It's a replica of ourselves. So if you've ever sat in your house and heard your husband come in, and then you saw his figure go by the hallway, and you're like, hey, what are you doing? And they don't answer, and then you're like, that's weird, and you get up and his car's not even in the driveway and nobody else is in the house, but you know that you saw him. That's a doppelganger. They believe that it is a double walker, that it's a double of yourself, and that it is actually someone from another dimension, and somehow the dimensions crossed, and maybe the dimension is from the other side, and they're coming to collect that soul of that person. Breaking a mirror. Obviously, we've heard that, right? It's not only bad luck, but in some cases, it's a death omen. It gives us 7 years of bad luck, or you die in a year. All of you have broken a mirror before, right? Some of you are like, no. When you bake a loaf of bread, it splits across the top. My bread always does that. Always. Sleeping with a fan running and the windows closed will cause imminent death. I should have been dead 50 years ago. And if your blinds fall down for no apparent reason, this could be death omen, or your cat jumped on them. Stopping clocks. This was something that was done, and it still is often done even in funeral homes. I have seen it. They will put the time of death on their clock. Clocks stop at the time of the death. It was a common belief that the clocks in the deceased person's home should be stopped at the exact moment of death. Restarting the clock could bring bad luck. It was part of the mourning process. Victorians believed that they were averting bad luck by stopping the clock. And then the death beetle was a beetle that is thankfully not in the US. And the death watch beetle is a clicking sound that they make, and they were often found in the wooden dressers, but they thought that if they heard it, then death would also occur soon. This is Ben the cat. My husband's mom was an amazing woman. She was a spunky redhead. She was a barmaid in Detroit, all of like 4'5" something, and she could break up any beer brawl, any bar brawl, and people listened to her. Several years ago, she ended up getting Alzheimer's, and she was going through some small strokes. She had previously survived breast cancer after having stage 4, but Alzheimer's and dementia really started to get her decline. And we ended up having to make some really rough choices and put her into a facility that took care of those that had dementia. It ended up to be a really bad facility. And she came to me, she was pretty much comatose, and she came to me in a dream and she said, Kristy, this is how she talked, funny stuff is going on here, and you need to move me as soon as possible. So I woke up that morning and I told my husband, we have to move your mom, and he's like, okay. Thankfully, he's pretty laid back and he doesn't question me too much. So, too much. So we ended up going to the facility and I told them we have to move her. And they're like, you have a contract. And I'm like, well, we're breaking the contract. And in the meantime, I had to find a place real fast. So I called around to some different locations, and the one said, it's so weird because we just had a death last night and we have an opening. I said, that's the place. And she had been like comatose for days. We walk into her room and she sits up and she goes, thank God you're here, crazy stuff is happening, and by the way, I need a taco. So we ended up getting her Taco Bell. She did not really eat it, but it was the whole idea of that was her last meal. And we said, we're going to move you, Mom. You're going to go to a good place that you're being taken care of. And it was really not far away from our house, and it was a home. It was somebody's home. And the hospice said, it's really odd because we're putting her, I'm going to cry, we're putting her in the room where everybody passes away. So we knew that her death was imminent anyway, and we wanted her to pass peacefully. It was the most beautiful yellow room with lacy curtains that looked out in a garden. There were deer that were in the back that were eating their hostas. It was just it was exactly what Mom would have loved if she had been not comatose, because then she went back to pretty much subconscious. She laid there, though, and with her eyes closed, she said, what is that? And they had a parakeet outside of her room that was chirping, and she loved birds, and she had birds. And we said, that's your birds, Mom. And she said, oh, good, don't kill it. We won't. She was very, very, very adamant that we did not kill that bird. And she had a love-hate relationship with cats because she had birds. And the hospice had a cat named Ben. And Ben was a little bit feisty. He wasn't one that you really could bend down and pet. He was a little bit like, I'll come to you when I want to come to you. I went, okay. The hospice said, we'll know when Mom's going to pass because Ben will lay on her bed with her. And so we showed up, and Ben was laying on the bed with her. And the hospice said, it's probably time. And so we sat with her, we played her music, we talked to her, we told her it was okay for her to go. And the hospice looked at us and said, she's waiting for you guys to leave. She doesn't want to cross with you here. And there's a lot of people that have guilt for leaving their loved ones as they're transitioning, because they feel like they're supposed to be there through all of that. But honestly, most times, it's their journey. And they're getting picked up by their loved ones on the other side and the angels, and there's no room for them with you there because you are making them feel guilty for leaving. So they stay. So hospice said, we'll be here with her, and Ben will be too. Now, our daughter was pregnant at the time. We knew that she was expecting a boy. We didn't know what the name was going to be. And I don't think she did either, because she was about 4 or 5 months pregnant at the time. And we just honestly got out of the driveway when hospice called and said Mom passed away. So she was just waiting for us to leave. And they said Ben jumped off the bed and went on his merry way of being feisty. But it was also interesting that the bird stopped singing right before we left. When we got the death certificate, I had to laugh because there's always signs. And she loved what I did for a living. And she ended up, the time of death was 11:13. That wasn't the time she passed away, though. She passed away several hours before. In Oakland County, you have to have them come out, and they have to actually give time of death. In some hospices, they don't require that. In some counties, they don't require that. But in Oakland County, they do, or they did. And she had passed around 7, but it was 11/13. And 11/13, November 13th, is my birthday. So that was her final heaven hello. Well, when our daughter had her baby, she announced the name, and she said, he's Benjamin. He's Ben. And we said, by the way, do you remember that the cat? And she goes, I didn't remember. She goes, I feel like that was help from Grandma. So they believe that if you're going to pass, that a cat will sit bedside at that sick person and they will pass away. Now, we have several cats, and they do sit bedside with us. We're okay. I hope. Coins on the eyes, that was another thing. You know, we see them put the different coins, and every coin has a different sort of currency, if you will. And it was to help pay the toll to the ferrymen who transported your soul over the river Styx. The tradition was continued long after, but one of the most famous examples was Abe Lincoln. So life has to end, she said, but love doesn't. And our loved ones and the love that we have for them continues on. In corporate America, we get 3 days to grieve. Get over it. Instant grieving, right? In Victorian era, they grieved for how many years? We get 3 days. I was working at a school district, and my mom was not doing well. We knew she was going to pass away, but she was rallying, what they call rallying, and you have high hopes when they rally. You're like, she's doing great, she's coming home tomorrow, and then they end up passing away. And it's something just like my mother-in-law that did with the taco and waking up. That is a rally that goes on. And so I was working in corporate America in education, and it was very toxic. It was a terrible experience. And I had taken several days off in order to be bedside with my mom, and then my mom passed away, and I had no more time, so I took my obligatory 3 days, and I came back after that 3rd day, and the office manager said to me, boy, you must not have loved your mom. And I said, excuse me? And she goes, well, you only took 3 days. And then she wrote me up because I actually was in the negative for days off. I didn't stay there for very long, just saying. So what do we do with people that are grieving? Be supportive. Don't ask them what they need because they're going to not know. And be there for them after that funeral. Check in with them 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 1 year. That's when they're going to need you. There's not a time limit on mourning. Keep the support going even after the funeral. My dad passed away a year and some change ago, and there are still days that I still cry myself to sleep. And when the minister was giving his funeral, I was a mess. And my sister was a mess, and the grandkids were a mess, and Chuck was a mess, and we were all a mess. And the minister said to us, you know, you can tell how much someone is loved by how much they're a mess. And he looked at me and he said, you know what? I don't think that my kids will be a mess when I die. And he goes, I think I need to make some changes. So it's okay to cry, and it's okay to be a mess. What questions do you guys have? Is anyone afraid to die? Because you're allowed to be. I'm not afraid to die. I'm afraid to leave my loved ones. That's what I'm afraid. Yes?
I have a question. When my mother passed away, we were told that she was in assisted living, and we were told to open the window.
Yes. That is another thing, is you open the window to let their soul go out. In hospitals, they don't have that. I worried when my brother passed away because I had no window. And it was interesting because I saw his soul go towards the window. and he went through the window. So apparently they figure it out.
She did the same thing that you were saying, that she waited till we left before she passed.
Yeah.
We were there for days,
Yeah. You hold vigil.
like an hour after we left.
Yep. A lot of times people will say, I just went to go get something to eat real quick, or I went to go take a shower, and then they pass away. And then there's guilt because I should have done that a long time ago, and did I let her suffer or him suffer? And no, their journey is their journey. But yeah, you are supposed to leave a window open. But most of, again, the hospitals don't have windows that can be left open. Any other questions? Yes?
Every time I dream of a deceased loved one, if they talk like in riddles or symbolically, why don't they ever just say exactly what they feel?
Oh my gosh. She asked why our loved ones on the other side talk in riddles and they don't talk in like the fluid. Like honestly, I have this problem, and this is what I do for a living. I had one gentleman a couple weeks ago who came through in spirit for his daughter, and he decided he'd play Pictionary for me. I'm not well with Pictionary. I do not do well with Pictionary. That is not my game. So it's interesting how they all have their own. It takes a lot of energy for them to communicate, and dream visits are amazing. And if you get a dream visit from your loved one, it takes a lot of energy, and I say that it really honestly is lightning in a bottle to get those. And if we got them so frequently, they wouldn't be as special as they are when we do get them. But yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of questions when I go to the other side, and I think that whoever is up there, if it's God, Alanis Morissette, I don't know, that they're like, we don't have time for you right now. Or they just think that you're that smart and you can figure out the riddles. Yeah. Yes.
I lost my husband in 2020, and every time I dream about him, it's we're moving furniture. I don't know what it means, but we're moving furniture.
One, I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Moving furniture is stressful. It's a stress dream. That you're still stressing and you're still trying to put everything back together and figure it out. It's a stability thing. So that's what that means. So if you're still doing it, if it's continuing, it means, obviously that was like yesterday still.
Yeah.
So you're still grieving, and you'll forever grieve. There is a statistic that says that we will grieve 50% of the time that we had with them. So if we had them for 20 years, we'll grieve 10 years. In a heartfelt, raw way. So, and after that, you're still grieving. You don't stop grieving. But yeah, it's a stressful dream. Does anyone ever get the lottery numbers from their loved ones? Because I'm also trying to have them do that. No. That's what I always get. Well, if you're so psychic, do you know the lottery numbers? No, because I get my information from your people on the other side, and they haven't given them to me yet, and I wouldn't share it with you. I'd share the lottery with you, but not the numbers. Any other questions? Yes?
Do you think like out of body experience or like astral projecting is like related to like your soul in like another dimension?
I do. I think she asked if astral projection or remote viewing or out of body, if that is your soul kind of leaving your body. It is. I sort of, and this isn't scientific, but I do believe that even when we sleep, that our soul kind of goes into this healing pod, and that's why we heal. We are supposed to heal so much when we're sleeping, and most all of us don't sleep real well, or we're taking a sleeping aid of some sort. So it's important to sleep, and it's important to heal. But yes, I do believe so. I had a really great friend of mine that worked with the military that was very good at doing astral travel, and he could tap me on the shoulder. I could feel a tap on my shoulders, and I'd get a text message, and he would explain what I was wearing and what I was doing and everything to an nth degree. It was creepy cool. Someone over here had a question? Yes?
What about animals passing, animals that you love dearly, and before they cross over, whether they go to dog heaven or whatever that is, but little signs or a little look on the corner of their eye before they go, are those valid signs? Are those?
Boy, I cry with questions about pets more than humans. So pets have such a pure soul, and they look to us for permission to go to the other side. There is also some statistic that says something to the degree of 80% of our pets need our help to cross to the other side, that they won't just pass away, that we have to help them. And we treat them so much better than we do most human beings. We let humans suffer while we help. You know, some people will say we play God with them, but I don't believe that to be true at all. But they're looking for permission from us to let them go to the other side. And I do believe that they go to heaven. I believe that they go to our heaven, that they're with our loved ones on the other side. They're not waiting in the wings for us. They're experiencing their heaven with our loved ones. Sometimes our loved ones don't love having them, but they love us enough that they have them. So, and I'm not a pet psychic, but I see our loved ones with our pets, and it's really, really special. I have one client who owns a bear rescue, so it's really crazy reading for her because there's bears on the other side. So, and she always has a porcupine that comes through too, which is also very weird. So the porcupine doesn't talk, neither does the bear, but the people up for her talk for it. But yes, they absolutely, and they tell us when they're ready to go. We've got one that's ready, but not ready. And then I do this, is it that I'm just not ready? So, yeah. And they will linger and hang on for as long as they can because of their love for us. Good question, though. Yes?
I've had a repeated dream years, so many years, of a loved one drowned. Repeated, it will happen quite often, and it'll be a while, but it'll happen again, oftentimes in the same spot. I've seen this spot in a physical way once.
Right. And it's someone that's still alive, though, correct?
Yes.
So it could be, she asked just for you if you didn't hear her, she's had repeated dreams of a loved one drowning, and she sees the spot, but sometimes the situations change.
Yes, and one time I actually went on vacation and saw that exact spot. I will tell you that vacation
Was scary.
it was my child, and he never
Yeah.
left my sight.
Yeah.
Like you're not moving away from my sight.
So I'm going to get a little bit woo-woo with you. So don't know if that's a yes or a no, I'm not sure. But I typically see that he may have passed away in a past life that way. And so there still is that sight, that feeling, that fear that's put into that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what's going to happen in the now or the future of this lifetime. Someone over here had a question?
I was just going to say, you did a reading for my husband and I, and the night before I asked for our dog to come through, and he did.
Aw, I love that. I love that because I always say I'm not an animal communicator, and that way I've got great friends that are, but that's not my specialty. It's sort of like a dentist trying to fix your broken leg. So the dentist could fix your broken leg, but probably shouldn't fix the broken leg. So, yes.
I'm going to ask, having lost siblings,
I lost my brother 2 years ago, and it was sudden, and it sucks. And I've had people ask me to write a book on the loss of a sibling, and I often say I can't because I can't put it into words. You feel like you've lost a piece of your past, and that something's been erased.
and truly, especially with our brother, I felt like he was so full. He was so much our family.
Yeah.
He would come through to us somehow. And I was wondering if there's anything you could do to be more receptive or.
So it's interesting that our grief often blocks our ability to sense them on the other side. It's a damned if you do, damned if you don't type of a thing. And I also believe that not everybody needs to go see a medium. I am not having you book appointment with me at all or telling you to go do it with somebody else because I wrote the books that I wrote to help you embrace your own intuition. I think everybody has that muscle. But I also think that sometimes we go through McDonald's to to get a hamburger because it's too hard for us to make our own hamburger at home and we're just too tired. And so I just called myself McDonald's. Is that what I just did? Maybe a bad metaphor. But yeah, so it is just keep inviting him and ask him for specific signs. So the more that you say, send me this, and then every time you get it, acknowledge it. And don't make it so simple. Don't be like, show me a Christmas tree and it's December. And don't make it so complicated like, I need a hippopotamus that's dressed in a purple tutu that then, don't make it so detailed. And then acknowledge it. I will tell you that my loved ones on the other side, they go through phases of being louder and quieter and coming through in the dreams. My dad comes through all the time. And I told the story, and I will stop this very soon because I know that I'm going to get kicked out soon. But my dad was our personalities do not change on the other side. If we were quiet here, we're going to be quiet there, and our signs might be quieter. If we were loud and obnoxious here, we're going to be loud and obnoxious there, and my dad was. So he was stubborn and strong-willed. My husband has multiple myeloma. He's in what they call response. You don't go into remission with MM, but he has done an amazing job. He had stem cell treatment in 2020. And we were going for his birthday appointment at Carmanos downtown, and we got a good clear. And so he said, I want to celebrate and get a milkshake at Chick-fil-A. So we're like, okay. So we're standing there, and they take the order, and then you stand to the side, and they call your name out. And my dad's name was Ron. And so we're waiting to place the order, and they go, order for Ron. And a guy walks up and grabs his order, and I go, oh, that's cool. That might be a heaven hello, but, it's Ron. And then order for Ron, and another gentleman walks up and grabs his order and takes it. And by this time, I'm like, okay, that's really weird. So then we'd place the order, and then order for Ron, and another man walks up and grabs his order. And I'm like, okay, someone's playing a joke on us now. And we walk over to the side, and we lean against the wall, and I'm like, did you notice that there was Ron? And he's like, yes. And then they go, order for Rhonda. And so if they want to get through, they will get through, but our grief creates that blockage. So don't give up on him. Don't do that. And sometimes it's a name. Have you ever seen a loved one that looks like your loved one? Have you ever seen somebody that looks like your loved one? Like you're driving in the car and you almost get, and you're like, oh my gosh, that looks just like my dad, or my mom. That is a heaven hello. Or someone's name being shouted. Yes?
I don't know if this is true or not, but my husband and I will be upstairs and something will fall in the basement, and I always tell him, oh, that's your mom doing something down there.
I love that. Yeah, that's an acknowledgement.
Your mom's doing it again.
And your mother-in-law's like, I keep getting blamed for this. What is wrong with you?
There's, it's not something that's easy to fall off. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something that, when the rim's on it, it's got to be
Oh,
pushed up.
they can push things. They can create chaos in a good way. In a good way. Yes?
Have you ever smelled cigar smoke at the Whitney? Mr. Whitney?
Yes. Yes. Scent is one big way that our loved ones even come through. Cigarette smoke, perfume, even bad smells, smell of their soap. Woodworkers, I'll smell the wood that they used to, or if they worked on cars, they were a mechanic, you could smell that diesel or that gasoline on them. It's a great way to sort of in your face, here I am. So yeah, I was just at the Whitney last week. I was actually in the turret room next to the Ghost Bar. I guess they call it the absence room now. So, yep. Any final? Yes.
Euthanasia. I can't very well tolerate when they're suffering, my animals. And what I have always been told, the vet said to me, when they stop eating, then it's time
Right.
to assist them.
Right.
Toss, is that bad?
Nope. I mean, because you don't want them to starve to death. That's a terrible way to die. We see that in hospice even.
I had one, it was a cat that belonged to my
Me too.
as much ice cream as I could get in her,
Yeah,
and then she finally quit eating it, and then
you knew. Yeah.
So you're not doing a bad thing.
You're not. No, you're not doing a bad thing. You know, it's interesting, and I don't want to get into a debate about this either, but there's several states with humans that now are allowing assisted suicide. You know, we had Dr. Kevorkian that took a big fall for this so many years ago, and one of them is New Jersey. And you have to be there for so long, and you have to obviously have doctors sign off, and there's no way that you will recover. One of them is dementia, Alzheimer's. A lot is Parkinson's, ALS, those that, you know, they know that they're not going to have a cure for. And I have had them contact me and say, all right, help me choose the perfect date. And it's tough, but I have seen the family actually be able to heal, grieve before the grief happens with the person that was passing away. I think we do that with our pets. Thank you guys so much for coming out.